Hey there, welcome to the Author's Way podcast, The Journey to Finding Your Voice. My name is Jennifer Wright, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different. So if you've been listening to the podcast, you have heard a couple of our shows where we were here at the Buckhead Club in Atlanta, Georgia, and we are back here today for a live podcast recording. The one thing that's a little bit different is that the topic of this conversation is actually going to be me. And we're going to be talking about my new book, The Author's Way Journal. I have invited Britt Harrison from the Buckhead Club, and she is going to be me today. So she's going to be the moderator of the conversation and will be grilling me or questioning me, I've given her kind of free rein to whatever she wants to do there. So welcome, Britt.
Thank you for having me, and congratulations.
Thank you.
We're all excited to hear more about your book, but I will dive in. And I have a question that I've always loved to ask anyone I meet that's new. It just happens to be about reading and books. And it is, they say that you live out your life based on the first book that you remember reading. So subconsciously, what book leads your life?
So that's when I was in second grade, and this is going to be an opposite of what the question that you asked. When I was in second grade, our teacher gave us all covers for books, like dust jackets for a book, and we were supposed to create a book based off of that dust jacket. So that was the first book I wrote.
What was it called?
Oh my gosh. When you said that, I was like, it's a horse is the name of, and it was actually that book was actually made into a movie recently, but I cannot remember the name of it. It'll come to me during the conversation, I'm sure, but it's about a horse. And I might still have it somewhere in the archives, but that we took construction paper and we stapled it together and made a book.
Old school book covers.
And then we wrote, all we knew was the title of the book and the picture on the cover. And then we wrote our own book based off of that. So that was my very first book.
And illustration, apparently.
We did illustrate
the
book. I'm gonna have to check at my parents' house and see if they still have
out
it.
Of the archives.
Yeah.
Mine is not as fancy. It's just if you give a mouse a cookie. It's very So,
nice.
Well, on that note, let's talk a little bit about where you started your journey in writing. What kind of brought you to this? How did you, besides being a phenomenal illustrator at a very early age, want to publish your own writing?
Oh gosh, it's a very long story and I won't get into all of it, but really what got me started was, so back when I was a kid, I hated my name. Wright, it's not spelled right. Nobody spells it. I always have to tell people how to spell it, especially when you're a kid. It's also at the end of the alphabet.
It's true. You go last in everything in life.
I'm last in everything. And so when I started school, I didn't have kindergarten. I started in first grade, but in first grade, they put me at the back of the room, back corner. And that's where I was, first grade, second grade, up until, I don't know, junior high, maybe. And because that's what they always did. They always put us in alphabetical order. So for years and years, I was at the back of the room. On top of it, I was the youngest person in my class. So, from that perspective, I was always last, the last to get your driver's license, the last, it was just the last for everything.
Yeah.
And then, through the years, other things, your name gets dropped off list, being the last. I would end up with my picture, the only picture on the page in the yearbook.
That's a spotlight. That's a feature.
Yeah. But there were just always things like, and I'm like, I just hate my last name.
Sure.
But what it did was being in the back of the room, it was quieter back there. And I would sit back there and read. And then I would sit from the time that I really could write, I would write. And I would write stories and I would write thoughts and ideas. And But I never showed them to anyone.
Did you have a journal that you wrote them in, or was
You
there any sort of collection?
Not really. It was just, whatever was there. I would just write on, I'd write on the back of the notebook. I'd write on, just whatever
In
was
the
available.
textbooks?
I never
Couldn't do
I-
that. They're going to make you pay for
No,
the
I
books,
had a
remember?
librarian. She would have, that would have not been good if
Yeah.
she'd caught me writing in the textbook. So I wouldn't do that. But I would read and I would write, and I would read everything. I would read the encyclopedia. I would read everything. And so it just created this. I was just always creating stories. I was just always creating, just making things up. And so it just created this, this need to always be telling something.
Okay.
However, and I think this was part of the being in the back of the room. I was an extreme introvert.
Okay.
So
You're sitting next to an extreme extrovert.
okay. All right. And I just didn't share anything. And then it became, as I got older, it became feeling like I didn't have a voice.
Interesting. After all
Um,
the writing.
After I didn't share it though.
Okay. Did you read it?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't read their writing.
Well, a lot of it just got tossed.
Yeah.
I didn't keep a lot of it, but there just became this thought, and even into my career, that I don't have a voice. And then when I started finding, so I started out, my first experience as a professional writer was as a copywriter.
Okay.
And I discovered that I had a way of taking people's information and being able to share it. Finding ways to put it together so you could share it. And I think that's how, by sharing other people's voices, I found ways to share my own.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So a lot of work in your early years went unpublished, from what I understand. What made you want to write a book about writing rather than sharing probably a lot of stories that had been developed over your lifetime?
If I were completely honest, I probably felt like it was easier than digging down into my own
Sure.
self. And that's coming next. There are some other things that are coming. But I also wanted to provide a tool.
Okay.
As I've worked with people through the years, I keep hearing themes. One,
What are some of those things?
So I can't write. I want to write a book, but I can't write. I'm not good at writing. I don't know how. I don't have time. So these themes just keep coming up over and over. And I wanted to provide a tool that would help people who are saying those things to themselves,
Right.
to find ways that you don't, number one, we're all better writers than what we think we are. It's not about grammar, and it's not about, you can fix all of that. It's about getting the words out and getting the information out. But so I wanted to provide people a tool that would help them to practice. It's really, writing is a learned skill. It's just like if you want to be a pianist, you practice every day. If you want to learn to play guitar, you practice. So writing is the same thing. You get better the more you practice. So I wanted to give people a way to practice where it's easy and it's kind of a no-brainer, and they don't have to think about it, and they can just sit down and write. So I came up with the idea for the book so that it's a 90-day journal.
Why 90 days, if you don't mind me interrupting?
Well, because I think it takes more than 30 days to create a habit.
Sure.
And so 90 days to me is you can get a lot done in 90 days. You can put a lot out there in 90 days.
I agree.
And by the time you've gone through if you do 90 days of writing, you've probably got a pretty good start on a book.
So speaking about the book, I got my copy when you told me about it, and when Amazon delivered it,
Yeah.
I cracked it open, and I always read through everything before I start reading it. And what I loved is that while it's a 90-day journal, you actually convey to the reader slash writer that they don't have to do it consecutively.
No.
Why was that? Because I loved that I had free will in this book, because how often do we read a book and we feel compelled we have to read it right away? I have to read every page. If I don't finish it, or what have you, you're automatically failing yourself. So what prompted you to kind of insert that free will, more autonomy? Because that is what people get overwhelmed with quite often, is the responsibility, or they feel like they're failing.
Because I don't like being told what to do.
Also same.
So I like being flexible in my own life. I don't like being, instructed to do something every day. So I wanted to give that same flexibility to the reader.
Adding to that too, each day has several options, and then just a carte blanche prompt too as well. So you have a prompt, or you have a word, and then what was the third thing?
So there's a writing prompt.
Okay.
There's a word of the day, and the word of the day is always a high vibration word or a highly positive word. And then there's a gratitude for the day. And now you can write the gratitude every day, but it can also be the topic for that day, or you can doodle, or you can write words, or you can do whatever you want. So it's completely flexible, so that there's even value. And there's a lot of writers out there that write about this value in just putting the pen on the paper and just starting to write, and whatever words come out of your brain, you put on the paper. It's kind of like stream of consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, but there's a lot of value in just sitting and doing that too. So I just wanted to keep it flexible, so that I think, especially for creatives, and for writers, if you try to restrict yourself too much, then what you're trying to get out won't get out.
Right.
So it's just giving yourself the freedom to let whatever needs to come out.
So tell us more about who you were writing this book for. What was that audience? What did they look like? What were their habits? What were you trying to help them maybe master, if you will? Is it creating a subject? Is it finding more diligence and routine in creating the writing habits? Or tell us more about that.
I think it's a little of all of what you said, but it's really just allowing someone who just wants to just free themselves up from whatever the rules are. And I have a thing about trying to release this idea about rules. And I was sitting here with someone last week, and I noticed, I was looking, the book was sitting in front of me, and I noticed, you look on the hardcover only, my last name is spelled wrong on the binding.
Is it really?
It is. Yes. Wow. There's a letter missing.
That's an Easter egg. We're going to call that an Easter egg.
But no, I'm like, that doesn't bother me. That does not bother me, because I'm like, that's kind of part of my passion, is let's get rid of some of these rules, and let's just release it, and let's just do what we want to do, and stop worrying about doing it perfectly and doing it exactly right. And so when I saw that, I'm like, oh, that's a great kind of symbol of something that I'm trying to do for myself. I have been a perfectionist in my lifetime. I'm trying to release some of that. And that's one of the things that I think people get so stuck on doing it right that they don't do it. So they get so caught up and I want to do it right that they stop themselves from doing it. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to get people to release that and just do it, and forget about the perfectionism, and forget about the you can get an editor. I can fix the words.
Right.
I can fix the grammar, but just get the words out.
It sounds like there's a lot of therapy in your mind that comes out on paper. I'll share the first day that I wrote in the journal. My grandfather passed away, and he was my father growing up. And I just started writing. And by the time I got to the end of it, the page was soaked. And I had never written before. So the first time I used your journal, I was able to put down on paper what I couldn't even say during his service. And it was beautiful. And I read it back, and now I read it every time I've got the slightest, inkling that I miss him. And it was this prayer that I prayed the night that he passed. So the therapy's in there too, even just, almost like a diary, if you will. I mean, it's your journal. You can really take it and make it what you want. What do you want your reader writers to take away from this? Like, what would be the top 3 things you really want them to kind of tap into at the end of it? You've mastered these things.
So I think number 1 is, just like I said earlier, you are a better writer than you think you are. I hear so many people saying, I can't write. I don't know how. I'm not good. But that doesn't even really matter. It's about getting the words out. To me, writing, it's like, and writing may not be your medium. Maybe music is your medium. Maybe speaking is your medium. There's all different ways of expressing yourself, and writing may not be the one for you. But I think it's worth exploring, and I think it's kind of a beautiful process. And I think there is a way, and I know for myself, I can put things on paper I can't say.
Right.
And so I think there's just, if you can explore it and you can see what you can do with it, there are just ways to just get the words out and forget about the rules for a moment. I mean, all of that can be fixed. Just get it out and express it, and use it as the medium to help be expressive.
Wonderful. I want to tap into your actual writing expertise for a moment. So I had this idea earlier when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you about. And somebody had sent me an email, and I read it, and immediately it was just terrible. And I thought, tone. It's so hard to convey tone in an email, in a text message, right? And what you just said there, it's so much easier to send a text, to write something down on paper, to type an email and send it. How do you create tone in your writing, and what tips or, what sort of practice can people start using to not only get the words down, but also create their own voice, their own tone through their writing?
Well, I think one of the keys is think about the person that you're writing to. I do think that we get a little bit caught up in the formality of some of our writing,
Right.
That we forget that there's actually another person on the other end that's receiving it.
Sure.
And I think that for me, that's probably what I do. I think about the person I'm talking to, and I think about it as a conversation. And I also think about what do I want to get from that other person? Because I mean, every time we communicate with someone, there's an exchange.
Right.
So I think about what I want to get from that other person, and adjust it based off of that as well. The other thing, and this is a corporate thing, I always put what you're looking for at the top, so they don't have to read like 50,000 paragraphs to get to the point. But that's just a corporate thing. Because I can't take an email that I have to read 3 pages before I know what I'm supposed to do. But
right. There's a time for summer, there's a time for expansion.
Yeah.
We can all agree on
Yeah.
that. So it's going to be a little controversial, but would you say that you played it safe writing this book instead of writing something that conveyed more of your own journey, emotion, tone?
I think for this book in particular, that wasn't the purpose.
Gotcha.
The purpose for this book was to create a tool that people could use. There, so I hadn't thought about it that I would say probably no, because that wasn't my purpose.
Sure.
Now there are 2 other books that I'm working on right now
Yeah.
that will get more into that. But
Any teasers? Can we have a teaser?
so, I mean, I'll tell you kind of general topics, but one of them is about being an introvert in a very extroverted corporate world,
Sure.
and how to kind of navigate those waters when you're told multiple times a day that you need to speak up more. So that's the topic of one of them. The other one is about women's voices in the leadership space.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we're all looking forward to those. I would like to open up the conversation to the audience because everybody's raised your eyebrow at least once. I'm very good on catching people's expressions. So are there any questions that we would like to ask, or I'm happy to lead a few conversation starters? Maxwell?
So when we spoke last week, you shared that everybody's on their own time. Some people take 6 months to write a book, some people take 6 years, 10 years. What would you say are some of the major benchmarks in any book writing process, no matter how long it takes? What would you say are the major benchmarks that once each one is completed, we're just got that part done?
All right. So what he's asking is, what are the major benchmarks that you move through? So number one, I would say when you're writing a book, give yourself at least 12 months. If you try to do it in less than 12 months, absolutely you can. There are people out there that do. But I think when you set those expectations for yourself, you end up getting disappointed if you don't meet them. So give yourself enough time to do it. If you think about the major benchmarks, for me, I am a planner. So I would say the planning process of putting your book together is probably one of and the strategy. I'm really, really big on purpose and strategy and goals. Thinking through what is your purpose in writing your book? What do you want to do with your book? How do you want to use your book? And really getting that clear in your head as you begin the process. So that would be one of the first ones for me. And then it's, it kind of falls in line how you would think it would. There's creating the content, and making sure that the content really says what you want it to say. There's the editing process. And it doesn't stop with the publishing process. There's a lot that happens after. A lot of people think, oh, great, I got my book published. Great. Now everybody's going to go out and buy it. And there's a lot of planning that goes into after the publishing process. So what do you to decide what to do with your book and how to market it and how to, and then, figuring out what next is with it. So I would say those are probably the main things for me. Hopefully that answered your question. Yeah.
What about titles? I'm all about a title. I'll go in the bookstore and I'm looking for a title, or I'm looking for, I'm a design person. So, the font, even the way that you were able to create light on a book, which is very difficult. So kudos on that.
Thank you.
What's in a title for you? How do you come up with that? Obviously, this is more instructional, but for the books that you're writing, what was your process with coming up for the titles for that or the content?
Titles come in, there's not really a one way.
Okay.
Titles come from a lot of different places. I talk to people who don't write their title until the book is done, because it comes through the creation of the book.
I see.
some people start with their title. They're like, oh, I've got this really great title, and this is what the book is going to be about. It really is individual to the author. And sometimes you have a title, but then as you're creating the book, then the title starts to shift. And you can do some different things. There's ways you can do title testing to see
Anything phonetic like that.
Yeah.
Title testing.
Yeah. So, you can talk to friends, family, their online services where you can do title testing and just see how people like the title, how people respond to the title. Focus groups. There's lots of different ways to come up with your title. I think it's just one of those things that it's individual to the author, and they have to kind of figure out what works for them. And then, if it's someone I'm working with, we have conversations about it, and we come up with different ways to figure out how to do that. But it is a very personal thing, I believe, for the author, because it's kind of like naming your baby.
Right.
Yeah. So
We won't name names.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's important for the author to really kind of go through that process and figure out the right way to do it for themselves.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I love how many times we get to say right,
Yeah.
even though you did not grow up liking your name.
Yeah.
Question for the audience, because from what we've heard, a lot of people are either interested in writing a book or have already published books. Do you have any questions as far as, are you stuck in your writing? Is there anything that Jennifer can hone in on to lend her expertise?
Mhm.
My turn.
Well, I think Eric had a question over here a minute ago.
Oh my.
I am
Oh,
so sorry.
Giving tree, by the way.
Okay.
Earlier.
That's such a good one.
Michelle. So my fellow extrovert gave a great story about how she used, maybe not this one, but a related book for an application that maybe you wouldn't expect. You probably think about that. It's not to write something that's a prayer, that's super cathartic. And where I was going to land with that is one of the things that I hear as someone who is an expert and avid reader, clearly from the introduction, but hasn't written anything yet, is the fear of writer's block, like getting in there, committing to it, and then just there's nothing. So is there something about this book, or is there a writer's block angle? And it's kind of, I think, where Britt was taking this as well.
That was a big part of the purpose that I created this book, is because writer's block is a thing, and it is something that I think all of us who want to write face. And so that was one of the purposes of this, is so that you have a tool you can sit down on any given day and have something to write about. I found that the best way to get rid of writer's block is to just write about something else. So if you're trying to write about a specific topic and the words aren't coming, pick a different topic or do a different project. And that helps to start to clear it up. And then you never know, when you start writing about something else, if the thing that you wanted to write about may start coming out. So that's kind of the purpose of this. So every day there are different things you can write about. So it just helps if you're trying to write about something specific, and you just write. And you never know when that might start to clear up and what you want to write about then. Or you may discover that there's something that you would rather write about than maybe the reason it's not coming is because it's not the thing you really want to write about. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit of the purpose of it.
And I think something just clicked. That's why every day there's a what are you grateful for?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I like it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Ralph?
Okay, so I'm sure a lot of the people that you work with, their books may be more about their life, their personal experiences, things like that. What's the best way to handle when you're a chapter in your book that may not paint someone in your life in the most positive manner, knowing that they're still alive and that they will read this book at some point? How in the world, without watering it down, because the story is important, but how do you handle that? Do you go to that person and go, hey, I'm getting ready to write this book, putting it out, you're gonna be mentioned in there, and this is the story, like, how do you handle that?
So the question is for the listeners, the question is, how do you write a story about someone else that may not put them in the best light? But it's a part of your story and you need to, and the story needs to be put out there. So I interviewed an author and she was actually going to be here tonight, but she wasn't able to be here tonight. And she gave me the best example of that. She published her book about a year or so ago. And her book there was some stories in there. And she told me she was very careful that she only wrote her story, that she didn't write someone else's story. And one of the things she did, so for instance, there were some pieces in her story that involved her parents. And she went to her parents and she told them what she was writing and she told them what she was writing about. And she asked them, are you okay with this? And there were some pieces of the story that they weren't okay with. And so she took those out. Because she said, this is my story. And she says, I only have the right to write my story. I don't have the right to write someone else's. So I found that to be like phenomenal advice in that. And I think you just have to find a way to tell it from your perspective. It is still your story.
I'm just gonna use Mike Poncho as my name.
Okay. Yeah, so but I thought that was some of the best advice from her is, just being, you do have a right to tell your story in any form that you need to tell it, but just being conscious that it is your story and not someone else's. And that's actually one of the, as an editor, that's one of the kind of the tough things I do run into sometimes, having to tell someone, you might want to think about reframing this so that you're not telling too much of someone else's story.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. So, did you have a question?
Just curious, for writing, like for other people or helping them write their story. What do you remember being one of the first ones that you did like that? Like, were you a child when you first did that, or did you not do that till you were an adult?
Let me make sure I understand your question. So you're asking about telling other people's stories?
Right, so like if you're helping somebody, like you're writing a story about in second person, or it's in somebody else's perspective, or you're helping somebody write their own book, you're still helping them see it from from their perspective rather than your own. I was just wondering at what point in life you started to do that.
Oh my gosh, what point in life I started to like help people? So probably where I remember it, and I probably did this before this, but when I remember it is really kind of started in my career. I started doing corporate training, and then I started doing business process, and that required me to interview people and ask lots and lots. And people hated me because I was the one that came in with all the questions. And I dug and dug and dug into all the questions. And that's probably the first time I remember really working at digging out, really digging in and digging out information from people. And I think that's one of the things that has made me better at book writing, is because I can really dig things out of people that they didn't. I actually have people say, I feel like I just went through therapy after I'm done with one of my sessions, because I do have a way of kind of digging in and asking lots and lots of questions to the point that I kind of drive people a little nuts. But that's when I first remember it. Now, I do remember when I was a kid, we lived way out in the country and didn't have a lot of neighbors. So it was me and my two sisters. And I think we had one neighbor around my age at that time. And we made up stuff all the time. We made up plays and we made up stories and we made up. So I think that's where some of that probably comes from, is because we just didn't have a whole lot of other kids around. So we were kind of left on our own to figure things out. So and I was also very different from my two sisters. I hung out by myself a lot. So a lot of times when I was hanging out by myself, I was out making things up. I was out like exploring and coming up with stories around like all of my different adventures and exploring out in the woods. So
Yeah, I grew up in the country too. So I think I get really happy in my own headspace, but it's a
Yeah.
lot of observing.
a lot of observing. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So. Okay.
You've transitioned out of corporate America into being sort of in the author circuit. It's the best way that I can describe it, being a corporate citizen myself. Do you have any advice for folks trying to make that transition? Is there anything that you found to help you make that transition? Just anything personal or advice for your listeners? A lot of folks seem to be going through that journey.
Right, right. So advice for people who are transitioning out of corporate America. This is my third time that I've done this. I tell a lot of people, don't do what I did, but or do. It's it's been a really long journey for me, and I don't think I regret any of it. I think it's all been. So someone asked me when the last corporate position I took back in 2019, I was just starting the book writing consulting gig. And the goal was to take that position, do the book writing as a side gig, and then step out. 6 months in, we went through a huge merger, and then my nice little easy corporate gig turned into a 15-hour a day, heavy workload, and the book writing kind of got stifled. And then I finally said, okay, I've got to cut it. I've got to go. And I just had to put a timeline on it. I had to put a date on it. And once I put the date on it, then we got the plan together for me to just step out. However, during that period of time, I did a lot of stuff. I learned, I coached, I read, I just went through, a big learning process. So by the time I was able to step out, I knew a lot more than I did to begin with. So I think just wherever you are in the journey, whatever your next thing is just keep learning about it. And I know it gets frustrating because it's like, oh, I want to be doing that. I don't want to be doing this. But I think if you can take the opportunity to use it as a learning, I think I knew so much more when I finally did take that step out than if I had done it, I don't know, 6 months earlier, a year earlier, because I took that time as a learning opportunity, so that by the time I was ready, I was ready. And I say that was my last corporate job, and my last corporate job. So that's the goal. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think I'm a planner, like I said. I think if you just put your plan in place and work your plan, you can get to wherever you want to go. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So,
So let's get outside of your writing and talk about what you like to read. Where do you find your inspiration? Are you Robert Frost? Are you going to nature? Are you picking up the Sudoku? Like what triggers you? What really actually inspires you?
so at one time I had about 300 antique books. And one of them it actually came from my great grandmother.
What was her name?
My great grandmother's name was Aura.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love a
Um,
grandmother's name.
Yes, Aura Chambers. She I got, and I can't even open it up now because the book is so starting to become very tattered. It's a book of poetry. And I adore that book. I have, and I've had it since I was a kid. And I think that's why it's so tattered now. I've got to figure out how to get it put back together. But it's a book of poetry. And I picked that book up, and I have other books of poetry. But poetry is one of the things that has always just kind of brought me, I don't know. I don't know if it's comfort. I don't know what it is, but there's just something about poetry, like old poetry.
Like the rhythm.
Like it's the rhythm, the rhymes, the sounds, the word. I mean, there's just something about it that I just love. But I love picking up a book of poetry, and I have tons of books of poetry at home. But yeah, there's just something about just reading, and I really like the old stuff.
Right.
Like the Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning and Percy Shelley, and like the really old stuff. Yeah.
What have you read that just shook you? Like what hit your core? What's something, I know you say you love poetry, but what's something that you've read that really shaped who you are, how you write? You read it and you're like, I want to write more like that. I want to
Gosh.
convey more, whatever that zhuzh is, if you will.
I don't know if there is any
It's a
one
very southern
thing.
word, zhuzh.
Yeah. Yeah.
It starts with a Z.
I don't know if there's any one thing. There's been lots and lots of things over the years. I mean, at any given time in my life, you could ask me, who's your favorite writer right now? And I would give you, and it's changed significantly over the years. And I've gone from reading, novels to reading business books to reading inspirational books. I mean, there've just been so many over the years. I will have to say that there's one recently. I've really gotten into this author, Ryan Holiday, and he wrote this book, The Obstacle is the Way. And it really kind of changed a lot of my perspective.
Okay.
How
so?
So, well, that book specifically is on the writings of Marcus Aurelius. And he really talks about, I mean, it's in the title, The Obstacle is the Way, how you use obstacles in your life to really kind of help to navigate through life. And so it was something and it's just one book. There's lots of other books out there that I've read that have like helped shape, but that's probably recently one of the ones that I've read that have really helped me to kind of shape some of my more recent thinking.
What about outside of reading? What in your life is shaping your stories or your perspective or the people or real life events? I mean, everything around you is really going to come through your writing, whether you intend for it to or not. So, what are some resources or who is inspiring you? What is inspiring you? Are you cooking a meal and you get an idea and then all of a sudden now I've got to, get this on paper, or tell us about a time where you've been inspired in the moment.
So I think for me,
Sorry, that was a two-part. I didn't mean to hit you
no,
at
that's
once.
okay. For me, it's finding experiences. Throughout my life, I have done ballroom dancing. I have learned to play guitar. I have learned stand-up comedy. I have played a little bit with playing the piano. I've painted. I draw. I'm always looking for something new to learn to do. I think it's the learning that I like. And so I think that's what really inspires me, is finding new things and new experiences to learn.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you do when you get stuck?
I do one of those things.
You just,
I pick up one of those things. I change something. If I'm stuck at writing, I work on a painting, or I work on a drawing, or I sing, or I work on, my stand-up comedy routine. I
which I
do
have to see.
something
I want to know
different.
more about that. I've never seen stand-up Jen, but I have to think she's pretty funny.
She's hilarious.
You're not
Yes.
an introvert. You're an extrovert hiding inside of an
Oh,
introvert
maybe,
is what has
maybe.
happened here.
Yeah. So yeah. That's pretty much what I do. I shake it up. I find something different to do.
What would you like to read? Like, what is not out there that you're always yearning for?
Oh gosh. I like entertaining. I like things that are
You mean Martha Stewart
thoughtful.
or
No, things that are thoughtful but also funny,
okay?
and things that have like a message, but do it in a way that helps you to kind of see things sort of more lightly, not so seriously. So looking at things in a funny way, but also taking apart serious topics in a funny way.
Like Curb Your Enthusiasm, but in real life, just all the time, right? Is
Yeah.
that what we're talking
Yeah,
about?
just
I like it.
because I mean, I think we take, and I am guilty of this. You're just taking things just so seriously, and I think there's ways of taking like these serious topics and turning them into funny, entertaining ways of looking at it.
So building on the question earlier about how do you write about someone, and let's take that and turn it into a hard subject to talk about to build on what you just said too. How do you write about a difficult subject that you know is going to be controversial, or is hypersensitive or relevant? How do you approach those subjects?
You make it funny.
You just
You
inject the
just
humor
make it
right in
funny.
there.
You
Yeah.
find ways to take the heaviness out of it. I think we get so caught up in making everything so heavy. I think you just have to find the lightness about it, and the joy about it, and just, I think everything would be funny. I think if we could just be humorous about some things, we would, we all just need to lighten up.
Everybody needs to lighten up.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's been really nice to see your evolution. And I remember when we met, you were still in the corporate world.
Mhm.
Do you see yourself writing a poetry book or a comedy book, or is that kind of incorporated in what you just released?
So, unfortunately, I don't write poetry. I love to read it, but the words don't come out of me in that way. But my goal is, for every book that I write, I want it to be light and funny. And I've even told myself that's one of the reasons I haven't written more, is because, and one of the reasons I took the stand-up comedy class a few years ago was I wanted to figure out how to write and get more humor in my writing. Because I really want the things that I write to be more humorous and lighter. So that's my goal with my own writing. Yeah. So I wish I could write poetry. It just doesn't seem to come out of me that way. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other
Great.
questions while we have some time? Maxwell.
So when and where is your next comedy show?
Oh, I don't have one scheduled at the moment. There probably will be one sometime in the summer. What I usually do is they have these alumni shows over at the Punchline, and I usually participate in those, or I try to. But there's not one scheduled quite yet at the moment, but I'll let you know. Yeah.
We haven't talked about it yet, but how do you tap into the resource if a reader writer wants to work with you? So let's say
Oh.
they're writing, or they're thinking about writing, or they've got something that, they really would love to tap into. How do they reach you? What's the process like to partner with you? Or, kind of what does that journey look like if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'd love to work with you. I think you could help me with my writing.
There's a couple of ways. So first we just start with a conversation. We start talking about purpose. Like I was talking about earlier, that because to me, that's the biggest piece of it. So we just start with a conversation. And they can do that. They can reach me through my website or my email, which all that information is on the show notes for the podcast. I'm going to be starting here in the next month or so, a new group, a new writers group. So that's one way. And we'll have group sessions, we'll have one-on-one sessions. And so we're going to be doing that. And then I'm going to be starting this summer, a 30-day writing challenge that's based on the book. And so we're going to be doing some writing exercises and having some fun, getting to know each other and doing some writing together for that. So, and all of that information can be found on the website, or they can just reach out to me at my email address, which is in the show notes for the podcast as well.
Well, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have a lot of your readers who are anxious to get your autograph and probably some words of wisdom in their book. So we'll go ahead and conclude our talk. And it's been amazing to hear from you. I do have one last question. And this is, it kind of comes full circle. I ask everybody I meet this. I probably asked you this before, but do you like pineapple on your pizza?
No.
More pineapple for me.
I am not a pineapple pizza kind of person. So yeah, no, that's just a little too weird for me. I'm very traditional pizza.
Well,
Yes.
Jennifer, thank you so much for having me. Your book has already made an impression on me. That's not me saying this for this podcast, but it's just saying I'm grateful and thankful that you did publish this so that we can all take it and make it what we need it to be in our lives right now. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Congratulations again. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for helping me with this podcast. I appreciate it. Yeah. And for the listeners, thank you so much for joining us. And this has been The Author's Way.